Rain had passed through the Assam plains during the night, soaking the red clay paths that wound between the tea plantations and forest edges. The morning patrol was moving slowly, their jeep tires cutting into soft ground. When they spotted the broken edge of a roadside ditch, mud crumbling inward, as if something large had fallen in, one of the rangers stood up and motioned for the vehicle to stop. No one spoke. Just below the surface, down in the washed-out gully, something moved, faint, sluggish, a flash of gray behind matted grass. The men approached on foot, boots sinking into the soft verge. In the ditch, wedged against the far wall, was a calf no older than a year. Her flanks were slick with mud, legs folded beneath her, and her trunk curled stiffly toward her chest. She did not try to rise. One eye blinked slowly, half-lidded. A soft breath shuddered through her. She had likely slipped in during the night. The slope was too steep to climb. Deep ruts showed where she tried. Clay had hardened around her, making a cradle of dirt she couldn't escape. There were no adult tracks nearby, no broken cane, no dung piles, no drag marks. It was clear she'd been alone for hours. Ravi, the lead ranger, crouched at the edge, peering down. "She's not calling," he said quietly, more to himself than the others. That was worrying. A calf in distress would usually cry for her mother or herd. This one had stopped, whether from exhaustion or shock. They didn't yet know. The calf's skin was dulled and dry in patches. Her right ear was torn slightly, likely from the fall. Her breath came irregularly, sides rising in shallow waves. One foot twitched as she tried to shift her weight, but it only sent a small cascade of dirt down into her flank. She didn't react. The team radioed back to the post. They would need assistance, ropes, tarp, water, and time. If the mother had been near, she might have returned by now. The fact that she hadn't meant to possibilities. Either the herd had moved on without her, or something had happened during the night. The men didn't say it out loud, but the silence spoke plainly. A lone calf had little chance, not just from exposure, but from predators, dehydration, or internal injury from the fall itself. The forest around them was still. A few miners called in the trees, but otherwise, no sounds of elephants, no low rumbles, no crackling branches, nothing to suggest a waiting mother in the bush beyond. Ravi slid down partway, careful not to startle her. She didn't flinch. Her eyes followed him, but remained dull, half closed. He stopped just above her level, watching for signs of defensive movement, ear flare, trunk lift, foot twitch. There was none. She was very small, likely born that same season. Her tusks hadn't come in yet, just small bumps beneath her upper lip. Her tail was caked with dried mud. She tried to raise her head slightly when Ravi moved closer, then gave up. Her breathing rattled through her chest. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a small canteen. Tilting it slowly, he dribbled a few drops onto the exposed part of her trunk. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with visible effort, the trunk uncurled. It hovered in the air, unsteady, then touched the ground near his boot. She wasn't drinking, just reacting. It was a start. If she had internal injuries, they would worsen with movement. But if she stayed there much longer, she would not survive the day. Her body was already cooling. Her skin had lost its warmth to the earth beneath her. Ravi looked up. "We'll need to lift her, but slow. Can't risk pulling too hard." The team nodded. They began clearing the area, laying branches over the slippery slope for footing. Ropes were unpacked. A folded tarp would be used as a sling. It would take hours. They had no stretcher, no tranquilizers, only the hands and patience they'd brought with them. The calf stirred again, eyes shifting toward the sound of a distant bird. Her ears flicked slightly. Then she let out a small, trembling rumble, barely audible, more vibration than sound. It wasn't a cry, not yet, but it was the first sign of her voice. They would have to move before the sun rose too high. Heat would turn the ditch into a trap of its own. If she cried again, and the herd was somehow still nearby, they might hear. If not, she would be lifted by human hands. As Ravi laid a cloth gently over her head to shield her eyes, the calf let out another faint rumble. Her front legs flexed once more. This time, she held them tense for a moment before collapsing back. A sign of will or resistance. No one could say. She's trying, someone murmured, and she was. But without her mother, without shade, food, or the herd's protection, trying would not be enough. That if they waited too long, she would die. If they rushed, they might break her. There was only one path now, slow, careful lifting, and the hope that someone, somewhere, still heard her voice. The tracks were shallow, scattered across the softened earth beyond the road, faint crescents and smudges that had nearly vanished with the morning's damp heat. Ravi knelt beside one of them, brushing away loose grass. It was adult-sized, possibly a female, but the edges were soft, days old. No dung nearby, no fresh breaks in the undergrowth. The trail was already going cold. The others moved through the low trees in a widening loop, watching for signs. Broken cane, overturned brush, or the telltale imprint of wide feet moving together. But everything around them spoke of absence, quiet spaces where elephants had once been, not where they remained. The herd had passed through, maybe 2 nights ago. It wasn't clear if they'd known she was missing, or if they'd had a choice to leave her behind. Back at the ditch, the calf had shifted slightly, legs sprawled unevenly as if trying to push herself upright. The tarp they'd stretched for shade flapped gently in the warming breeze. She was breathing harder now. Not panic, not yet, but the kind of shallow exhaustion that comes when an animal begins to burn through reserves. Her ribs rose and fell with uneven rhythm. Her trunk moved, but no longer explored. Ravi returned from the tree line and shook his head once. Nothing fresh. They poured a little water into a shallow bowl and placed it near her face. But she didn't respond. Her ear flicked when a fly landed, then drooped again. They didn't speak much. Decisions in the field didn't require long discussion. If the herd was gone, the calf would not survive here. But lifting her now, without sedation, without any knowledge of internal injuries, could also cause damage or worse. And if the mother had somehow stayed near, hidden beyond a ridge, she might return at the sound of her calf's cries. It had happened before, rarely, but it had that, so they waited. 1 hour passed. Then too, the calf didn't call again. Instead, her trunk lay motionless beside her face, half curled in the dirt. The energy required to vocalize, to send out that instinctual, vibrating pulse into the hills, had left her. A kind of quiet settled around her body, the heavy stillness of an animal no longer asking for help. By mid-morning, the shade had shifted. They adjusted the tarp. One of the rangers, Amin, knelt just at the edge of the pit and dipped the cloth in water, pressing it lightly along her ear ridge. It wasn't medical, just an act of comfort. The calf blinked slowly but didn't turn away. From a short distance, the ditch now looked like a wound in the earth, sunken and raw. She had fallen deep into it, and though they didn't know how long she'd been there, her body was beginning to show signs. Skin drying, lips cracked at the edge. Tail unmoving, Ravi made another loop into the forest, tracing a dry gully and circling back through bamboo stands. No movement, no trumpeting, just rustling birds and the faint hum of insects growing louder in the heat. If the mother had heard her, she would have come by now. If the herd was anywhere nearby, they would have answered, even with distant rumbles or branch-breaking calls. The forest was silent. and the calf had stopped calling. The team huddled beside the jeep. The decision was no longer a matter of preference. It was a necessity. Every minute forward brought risk. But the greater risk was waiting. She won't last till evening, Ravi said quietly. We lift her, slow, with support on the belly and legs. They didn't need to vote. The group moved with purpose, unrolling the sling they prepared. For straps, a wide canvas square. They would dig shallow footholds into the side of the ditch and lower to men down, to slide the support beneath her. Once she was secure, the others would haul steadily, not jerk, not tilt. Elephants could panic under pressure, but this one showed no sign of panic, only silence. Before climbing down, Amin knelt and whispered, "It's okay, girl, we've got you now." There was no reply, but the calf lifted her trunk slightly, just an inch off the ground, and let it rest gently across her own leg. A small movement, nothing more. Maybe instinct, maybe trust. No one tried to define it. As the first rope was secured around the upper slope, and the team began testing weight, the breeze shifted across the clearing. Leaves moved in soft bursts. Somewhere far off, a colt called once and fell quiet again. That no reply came from the forest. The herd, if it had ever been near, was gone. If they waited longer, the calf might slip beyond recovery. If they moved too quickly, her body might not hold. But they were out of time for choices. Only action remained. By the time the sun dropped behind the sal trees, the clearing had cooled enough for the men to begin. Light filtered through the high canopy and broken shafts, touching the ditch in long gold strips that softened the hard edge of the mud. The tarp fluttered above the calf's head. Her eyes remained half closed, breath shallow, limbs tucked awkwardly beneath her. Too tired to tremble, they had waited as long as they could. Now the ropes were laid out, loops tested, canvas checked for fraying. The harness had been improvised from an old stretcher frame and sections of reinforced tarp, sewn tightly into the webbing. The digging tools had been used to cut shallow notches into the slope just enough for foot placement. Ravi pulled a rope over his shoulder and tied the safety knot with practiced fingers. There was no need to rush, but there was no room for hesitation either. Each movement had to be carefully controlled. He didn't speak again until his boots touched the edge of the pit. "Lower me slowly," he called quietly, "and keep the edge clear." The men above steadied the rope as Ravi took his first step down. The soil held, barely. His foot slipped once, then caught in the ledge carved out that morning. Inch by inch, he moved, one hand gripping the rope, the other keeping balance against the mud wall. The calf did not stir. Only when he was within arm's reach did she shift slightly, her head turning toward him. Her ear twitched at the sound of rope sliding, and her eyes blinked, not in alarm, but in slow, heavy motion. There was no energy left to be afraid. He crouched beside her, careful not to crowd. The space was narrow, filled with the smell of damp earth and animal warmth. Ravi waited. Then slowly, he extended a hand, not toward her face, but toward her side, where the tarp sling would need to be pulled through. Her breathing quickened briefly, but she didn't flinch. He whispered, "Good girl." His voice nearly lost beneath the creak of tension above. Her skin was rough and cool to the touch. He could feel the rhythm of her lungs through his palm, irregular and shallow. A tremor ran through her front leg, barely noticeable, like a ripple across standing water. Ravi unbuckled the folded tarp and began sliding it beneath her, one edge at a time. The fabric bunched against her back, so he paused, gently lifting her flank with one hand and flattening the cloth with the other. Her body leaned toward him slightly, not in trust, but in imbalance. She no longer had the strength to hold herself upright above. The others fed slack into the rope as needed. One of them knelt, eyes fixed on the ditch. The light was fading fast, and soon they would need torches. But for now, the last of the natural light still clung to the scene, soft and gold. As if trying to make the task easier, the second looped past beneath her belly. He moved behind her now, watching the delicate placement of the straps. Her tail barely twitched when the canvas brushed it. Her hind legs remained still. Every motion was deliberate. Every breath is measured out once the sling was beneath her. Ravi paused. He pressed his hand gently to her side again. Almost done, he said softly. She shifted slightly, and for the first time, her trunk lifted just a little, not toward him, but up into the air, as if seeking scent or sound. Then it dropped again. From above, the voice of Amin, ready on your word. Ravi gave a final check, securing the last knot around her front shoulders, crisscrossing the sling to avoid any shift during the lift. Then he looked up, nodded once, lift slow, left side first. Steady tension, the ropes tightened, groaning under the sudden weight. Mud cracked around the edges. The calf didn't cry out. Her eyes widened briefly, then closed again. The men above pulled in rhythm, 2 on each rope, heels braced against dug-in stones. The calf rose inch by inch, her body cradled in the sling, legs dangling but close to the earth. Ravi stayed below, guiding the rise with his hands. He watched her feet clear the slope, watched her body sway once, then settle as the lines adjusted. And then she was out. Her body lay on a flat patch of grass and soil covered in blankets. The men worked fast but quiet, checking for cuts, clearing her airway. Draping wet cloth across her back, Ravi climbed out last. The sun had dipped fully now, and the first insects of the evening had begun to sing. She had been lifted gently. No cries, no collapse, just the tremble of muscle and the press of rope across tired skin. What came next would be harder, but for now, she was out of the ditch and still breathing. The sling creaked under tension as the men adjusted their grip. The calf's body, now fully cradled by the harness, hovered just above the ground. Legs slack, but not dragging. The rope line stretched taut from 3 angles, held steady by the silent coordination of hands that had done this before. Not often, but enough to know how little room there was for error. The sun had dropped below the forest ridge, and the air was cooling fast. Shadows from bamboo and teak leaned long across the clearing, darkening the edges of the road where the ditch had swallowed her the night before. Her body swayed slightly with each step the men took backward, guiding her to the patch of softened earth they had cleared with rakes and shovels. 2 tarps were spread there, layered with cut grass and wet cloth, just enough cushion for her to lie on without pressure against her joints as they lowered her. The calf's eyes opened wider. She blinked several times, adjusting to the change in height. Then, just as her rear legs made contact with the earth, her mouth parted and a sound rose from her, sharp, shrill, and rising. It cut through the air like a bolt of wire pulled tight, a calf's distress call. The cry was high and uneven, trembling through her chest in short bursts. It wasn't a scream of pain, but of fear, the moment when confusion overtakes fatigue, and the animal realizes it has been moved, touched, lifted by something unnatural. The team froze. Ravi held up a hand, and all movement stopped. The ropes went slack but held. The sling cradled her just off the ground as she let out another call. Longer this time, a trumpet broken in half by uncertainty. Then silence. Even the birds paused. One of the rangers turned toward the forest, scanning the ridge lines behind the trees. A slight shift in the wind sent dry leaves scattering across the ditch, but no sound came with it. Then, faint and low, came a reply, not close, not urgent, but unmistakable, a rumble, drawn up from deep within the chest far larger than hers. It rolled over the hill like distant thunder. Then silence again. The calf turned her head, ears rising slightly. Her body trembled beneath the sling, not from fear now, but alertness. Her trunk moved, reaching forward as if grasping for air that no longer smelled of humans. The men didn't move. They listened. Seconds passed, then a minute, and then the sound of a branch cracking. Another movement, slow and deliberate. From beyond the bamboo line where the brush grew thick and dark, the team backed away from the calf's body. The sling was fully lowered now. They released the knots and let the canvas rest beneath her, no longer touching her skin. No one spoke. Something was coming. They couldn't see it yet. Only the subtle sway of treetops and the heavy push of bodies through undergrowth. It wasn't fast. There was no charge, no aggression. Just presence. Ravi stepped behind the jeep, keeping the team between the calf and the approaching sound, not as a wall but as witnesses. There would be no restraint now, no further lifting. If the response came, it would come on the animal's terms. The calf remained lying, but her eyes followed the movement. Her trunk stretched again, this time curling slightly at the tip. Her ears stayed lifted. Another low rumble rose through the hills, closer this time. And then, the soft, deliberate sound of heavy feet pressing into damp earth. One by one, the trees parted. A female elephant emerged from the brush. She was older, her skin darker, and marked with deep creases across the shoulder line. Her left tusk was chipped. A notch cut through her right ear. Old and healed. She stopped just short of the clearing. Eyes locked on the calf. Behind her, another shadow moved, a juvenile, smaller but still nearly full grown. Two more shapes waited in the trees, half hidden. The matriarch lifted her trunk into the air and sniffed once, then twice. She stepped forward. The calf didn't cry again. She didn't move at all. Only her ears fluttered. Once, if this was her mother, they would see it. If not, the response would be clear. But either way, something ancient had been called. Something had heard. The jungle, for a brief moment, seemed to breathe. If this reunion was real, she might live. If not, the separation could cost her everything. The clearing remained quiet. As the sky dimmed and the herd stood just beyond the edge of knowing, the older female stepped into the clearing with a deliberate stillness that made every sound in the jungle fall quiet. Her ears fanned once, wide and watchful. She was large, heavier through the shoulders, and bore the weathered signs of age scars near her flank, worn skin along the ridge of her spine, dust in the creases of her legs. Each step she took pressed deep into the soft ground, leaving prints that filled slowly with rising dew. She paused just beyond the edge of the ditch, her eyes fixed on the small body lying on the canvas. The calf had not moved in several minutes, but now her head lifted slightly, ears perking, trunk twitching toward the scent that drifted in with the shifting wind. The silence grew dense, layered with invisible tension. No one moved among the humans. Then, without warning, the calf rolled to one side and lurched to her feet. Her legs wobbled beneath her. For a heartbeat, she seemed uncertain. One step forward, then a stumble. But she caught herself. Her body swayed, and then she moved again, faster now. Toward the female, she let out a high, breathless squeal. Not a cry of fear, but a call that cracked at the edges. Sharp and urgent, the older elephant remained still. She did not trumpet. She did not rush forward. Instead, she lowered her trunk to the ground and waited. The calf reached her and stopped just short. Her legs splayed slightly as she braked, breath chuffing from her mouth. Her trunk waved in a frantic half circle, then lowered. She tilted her head. The female stepped closer, one pace, then another. She circled the calf slowly, not touching at first. Her trunk extended, weaving lightly through the air, passing near the calf's side but never landing. She sniffed along the edges of the smaller body, flank, legs, tail, ears. A soft rumble passed through her chest. Low and almost musical, the calf stood motionless, eyes wide but unblinking. Then, the older elephant made contact, her trunk, broad and scarred, lowered across the calf's back and paused there, pressing lightly. Not possessive, not forceful, just a gesture of acknowledgement. The calf shuddered. Her tail flicked once. Her eyes closed briefly. Then her body sank, not collapsing, but folding gently onto her knees. The female stood over her trunk, still resting along the spine. Another rumble followed, deeper this time, resonating in the earth. Ravi, watching from the jeep, exhaled slowly. It was the first sound any of the rangers had made in minutes. They know each other. Alman whispered, whether it was mother or matriarch, aunt, cousin, or elder. It no longer mattered. The bond was clear. The calf had called and someone had answered. The younger elephants that had lingered in the tree line stepped forward cautiously. One of them, a juvenile female, rumbled in greeting but kept her distance. Her dynamics would determine the next moves. But for now, the matriarch was in control. The calf remained kneeling, her breathing slower now, steadier. The older elephant stepped to the side and allowed the calf to rise again. When she did, it was with less urgency, a smooth, trembling lift from knee to foot. Her trunk reached up and touched the underside of the elder's jaw. Just once, they stood like that, facing each other. The jungle held its breath. Around them, the dusk deepened. The last rays of light pooled in the low places between trees. Crickets began to hum softly. The men slowly backed away, clearing space. No orders were given. It didn't need to be said. The work was done. The herd had come. She had been left behind. Maybe by accident, maybe by circumstance. But now someone has returned. She was not alone. If this bond held, she might recover. If the matriarch accepted her fully, she would be fed, protected, taught. If not, she would still have more than she had before. A voice heard, an answer given. As the older elephant stepped toward the tree line, the calf followed. Not quickly, not yet fully steady, but with a clarity of direction that had been missing since she was found. One life had paused in the ditch, wrapped in silence and fading breath. Now it moved forward, guided by something older than names, older than fear. That by the time they reached the shadows, only the shape of their bodies remained, tall and small, side by side, moving as one. The forest swallowed them slowly. Step by step, the older elephant moved into the trees with the calf at her side, their bodies casting long shadows across the clearing. The light had thinned to a quiet gray. That still hour before nightfall, when color drained from the world. Leaves shifted overhead in slow waves, stirred by the first touch of cooler air. Ravi stood by the edge of the ditch, hands at his sides. He didn't speak. None of the men did. The ropes lay coiled beside them, the canvas sling folded neatly, damp with mud and sweat and traces of blood. Every part of it would be clean, checked, packed away, but not yet. The calf walked behind the older female now, her pace uneven but determined. She stepped through ferns taller than her shoulders, brushing aside reeds with her trunk, placing each foot into ground still soft from rain. Her tail flicked once, a small arc through the dusk. The matriarch paused at the line where clearing turned to undergrowth. Her ears moved, her head tilted slightly, as though listening. Then she turned back for a breath. She faced the men behind her, not close enough to threaten, not far enough to ignore. Her eyes were unreadable in the fading light, but her body held still, firm and rooted like stone. That it was not a gesture of thanks. Elephants do not speak that language, but it was something else. Recognition, maybe. A pause between partings. Ravi lowered his gaze briefly. When he looked up again, she was turning. The calf followed, brushing against the matriarch's flank. Together they moved deeper into the brush, their bodies growing dim between trunks, their sounds muffled beneath the undergrowth. No call was made. No rumble broke the stillness. And then, they were gone. Only the trail remained, a faint, broken path where bent grass slowly rose again. Where a single print filled with pooling water the others began to gather the equipment, slowly, with the quiet rhythm of men who knew not to disturb what had just passed. Ravi stayed a moment longer, his eyes scanned the tree line as if expecting one final glimpse, but nothing moved. The forest had closed behind them. He remembered the way the calf had looked when they found her, folded in the ditch, like something discarded by the world, too quiet to fight, too young to understand. And then the sound she'd made, the one that changed everything. A cry pulled from the lungs of something not ready to leave. Sometimes it was enough. Sometimes one voice, unanswered for hours, still reached the right ears. The team moved in silence, loading gear into the Jeep. Pressing footprints into the same path the elephants had taken minutes before that. No photos were taken. No radio calls were made. There would be time for reports later, for veterinary records and written accounts, but not yet. Some stories stay in the lungs for a while, breathed in but not spoken. They left the ditch uncovered. By morning, the rains would likely wash its edges down further, returning it to a shallow scar in the land. Nothing in the forest remained unchanged for long, but somewhere beyond those trees, a calf was walking beside a mother, or someone who had become one. Not every bond begins at birth. Some arrive at the edge of endings, and whole, just in time as the light faded fully and the first stars found the gaps in the canopy. A breeze lifted across the clearing. It moved the branches gently, rattled a piece of cloth that had been forgotten on the ground, and stirred the scent of wet grass and elephant skin into the air one last time. Then, quiet, nothing left but the shape of the bodies once resting there, and the space they no longer filled.